okay, so what's wrong with, and why doesn't Poland want to join? Basically, what's wrong with being part of the eurozone? I mean, that sounds great so far. There are some, when we look at the drawbacks then of being part of the eurozone, there are some trivial ones. There's actually kind of conversion costs. Yeah, so obviously you've got to print your own coins, and you've got to actually make your own. Well, particularly notes and coins, particularly coins have to be produced. You've actually got to change prices. You've probably got to, you're going to have to, and so that imposes costs on businesses because they have to change all their computer systems, payroll systems, and so on and so forth. You're presumably going to have to tell people that you're going to change the currency, so there's the cost of kind of adverts and so on and so forth. But those are all kind of one-off and relatively trivial costs. The big risk, is the risk of what's called an asymmetric shock. So something that affects your economy that doesn't affect others. Because, so if you're Greece and you're particularly badly affected by the financial crisis, then being part of the eurozone, suddenly you've got a problem. Your problem is, and the problem is the one-size-fits-all monetary policy. So you've got relatively high unemployment compared with the rest of the eurozone, so what are you going to do? The European Central Bank isn't interested because it's going to set interest rates for the benefit of the eurozone as a whole, and the eurozone as a whole basically means Germany and France and Italy, but not you. So can you cut your interest rates? No, you can't cut interest rates because you don't have any ability to control your own monetary policy. And you can't do QE because you're not the European Central Bank. So you've lost all of your ability to use monetary expansion to get yourself out of trouble. And you can't decrease your exchange rate because you're part of the eurozone. So you can't allow, in the olden days the Greeks could have allowed the drachma or whatever to depreciate, but you can't. And there are also limits on what you can do with, there are limits on fiscal policy as well. You've signed up, to say I'm not going to get into excessive debt. And that leaves, potentially, you're in a mess, because you're going to find it very difficult to recover from recession unless your labour and product markets are really flexible. So the big danger is this idea that you become, the convergence criteria were designed to avoid this, but that you become out of step with the other Eurozone economies, and then policy doesn't work for you anymore, and then you get stuck in recession for a long time. Now then, So that's a big worry. And Mundell says, so there's a guy called Mundell, and he said, if you're going to have the same currency, there are certain criteria that he says reduce the risks of being part of it. So he said that he said that these were the criteria for what he called an optimal currency area. And he said that therefore the eurozone will be less risky for member states, if the following things are true. So, firstly, it's good if all economies are similar with similar economic cycles. And by economic cycles, I mean that they all tend to have booms and recessions together. So when Germany's got inflation, then so does Greece. When Germany has unemployment, so does Greece. And therefore, that means that the single interest rate policy can work. So the single interest rate policy will be effective. And therefore, there won't be asymmetric shocks. There won't be a shock that affects one country that doesn't affect another because they're all very similar, which is lovely, but probably, when we look at what happened in the eurozone during the financial crisis, that wasn't true. So he said, well, okay, suppose that they're not that similar. It'll still be okay, provided we have automatic fiscal transfers. And by fiscal transfers, that means the idea that tax revenue can flow or government spending can flow from countries that are doing well to countries that are doing poor. So in other words, that the rich, successful parts of the country, of the zone, automatically transfer funds to poor areas. Which sounds that sounds slightly weird, but if you think about the UK, that does happen automatically in the UK. If Newcastle has suddenly high unemployment, well, automatically those people go and claim unemployment benefit, and that unemployment benefit isn't paid by Newcastle. It's paid by taxpayers in the south. Well, it's paid by all taxpayers, but it's paid by taxpayers in richer areas, effectively, where unemployment isn't high. We, as the UK, a single currency area, we automatically transfer money to areas of high unemployment through the benefit system. In the case of the eurozone, the Greeks pay their own unemployment benefit. Yeah, the Germans don't suddenly send Greeks loads of money. Because they don't want to. So there's no automatic system through which demand will be stimulated in a country that has had some sort of an asymmetric shock in the eurozone, whereas in the US or the UK, the US has a single currency, the dollar, the UK has a single currency, the pound. There are automatic transfers from high income areas to low income areas through the benefit system. In the eurozone, that's true within a country, but it's not between countries. And therefore, if you are a country that gets out of step, like Greece or Portugal during the financial crisis, there is no money automatically, at least, coming from the centre. Now, they might choose to give you some, but that's politically difficult. But there's nothing automatic. And Mundell said if it's automatic, that will make the currency area more likely to work, because anybody who has some bad shock happen to them will be helped to recover from that shock. But he said even if there aren't automatic fiscal transfers, he said, provided you've got, kind of occupational and geographical labour mobility, then it'll still be okay. So you're a country, you've had a shock, unemployment is high, therefore, in your area, you're not recovering, the government can't cut interest rates because the European Central Bank's in charge, so that's a problem. But it's okay if there's occupational and geographical labour mobility, because workers will simply either retrain or relocate. If there's occupational mobility, areas that have been hit hard, they simply kind of go, oh, well, okay, I'll go and retrain something. Or if there's geographical mobility, they'll go to areas where unemployment is lower, where there are skill shortages. So, in principle, in the UK, obviously, if you're unemployed in Newcastle, it's not particularly difficult. Well, I mean, it's somewhat difficult, but it's not too hard to go to relocate elsewhere. In the eurozone, that probably is harder, because of kind of language difficulties and cultural difficulties and so on and so forth. Yeah, but in theory, if you have occupational and geographical labour mobility, then even if unemployment's high, workers can leave and get jobs elsewhere. And lastly, he says, if none of those are true, as long as you have wage and price flexibility, in other words, wages and prices are not sticky, then the economy will quickly self-stabilize. So if there is a decrease in aggregate demand, and your economy is shocked and unemployment goes up, you may be stuck to start with. But if labour and product markets are fully flexible, in other words, there is no sticky wages or prices. I'm not going to be able to scroll this up, am I? Because it's a physical whiteboard. If unemployment goes up, then as time goes by, if wages and prices are fully flexible, what should happen is that wages will go down. When wages fall, that's going to decrease firms' costs. When firms' costs go down, that's going to lead to a decrease in the price level. And if the price level goes down via things like the real balance effect and the trade effect, aggregate demand will go up again, and the economy will recover from a shock. So Mundell says that if you're going to have a single currency area, it's only going to work well if these four conditions are true. That we have to recap, we have one, similar economic cycles. Two, automatic fiscal transfers, so benefits tax system works between all members of the single currency area. Three, we have mobility in labour markets, both geographical and occupational. And fourthly, if labour and product markets are fully flexible. Yeah, so no sticky wages and prices, so that the economy, oops, not sticky pages, yeah, sticky wages and prices, so that if there is a shock, yeah, the economy can then self-stabilise. For the eurozone, that's probably not true. The economic cycles aren't really that similar. Yeah, the olive belt countries like Spain and Italy and Greece, they operate on a very different set of economic dynamics to places like Germany and the Netherlands. There are not automatic versatile transfers. Yeah, the Germans aren't going to send their money to Greece automatically just because Greece has high unemployment. Occupational, we know that generally, the EU as a whole tends to have relatively inflexible product and labour markets. And certainly language difficulties are going to make it difficult to relocate. And sorry, as I just said, product and labour markets tend to be relatively inflexible, and that therefore creates the sort of risks that we saw during the financial crisis, where some of those eurozone economies got into big trouble and there was no very easy way for them to get out of it. And it's still the case that even today, unemployment in Greece is well above the levels that it had before 2008.